Good evening, all. Today, from the technical team of IAP India, I, Dr. Smarnika, I welcome you all to the webinar, which is our 13th webinar of IAPWC Goa. Today's topic is hand rehabilitation, and we have with us today Dr. Kishore. Moderator for today's session is Dr. Rashmi Pawar. So, without further ado, I would request Dr. Rashmi to please start the presentation and webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Smanika. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 13th webinar by the IITWC Goa team on clinical examination of the hand by Dr. Kishore Kumar. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Kumar. He has completed his physiotherapy in Valley University and his master's in physiotherapy in Savita University, Chennai. He is presently pursuing his PhD in Valley University, Chennai. He is the founder and director of KK Physio and Hand Therapy Center in Chennai. He has 14 years of clinical experience in the field of hand rehabilitation, orthopedics, neurology, and pediatric physiotherapy. He has formerly been an assistant professor in Valley University, Chennai, and is currently the senior consultant in various clinical settings in Chennai. Dr. Kumar has received the Career Appreciation Award for his significant contribution in the field of physiotherapy by Wright Hospital, Chennai. He is also an active member of the Journal Club and has published many papers. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rashmi. And at this juncture, I would like to thank IAP Goa branch, Women's Cell, and Dr. Smarika Das to giving this platform for giving this webinar about hand rehabilitation. And good evening, all present over here for this webinar. My topic today is clinical examination of hand therapist approach. So what are the things we have to see in examining a hand patient, any hand patient? So what are the objectives? So the objectives for the clinical examination are observation, palpation, motor examination, sensory examination, sympathetic evaluation, and vascularity. So we will see all the headings one by one. So physical examination. What you will examine physically in the first part. So always the attitude of the whole limb should be seen, okay, with reference to the hand. It's not that when you are examining a hand patient, you should see alone the hand abnormalities. If you are seeing any hand injured patient or any hand pathological patient, you should keep the upper limb as a whole reference. Okay. In the left hand side slide, you can see an adult. His right arm, you can see the flail upper limb. Okay. This is a case of traumatic brachial plexus injury. Global palsy, that is known as global palsy. Global palsy is there will be avulsion of C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1 brachial plexus nerve roots. Okay, that causes denervation of all the those nerve roots, which causes disuse atrophy, loss of sensation, right, and muscle paralysis. So you can see the atrophied upper limb while observation. Okay, that is known as flail upper limb. Then in the right hand side picture, clinical picture, you can see a baby whose right arm is fully extended, right, at the shoulder, right, shoulder it is adducted and it is extended. Then elbow it's extended. The wrist is ulnar deviated and there is a bit of extension. Right, the fingers are fully flexed. Fingers and thumbs are fully flexed. Okay, so this is a case of obstetrical brachial plexus injury. Okay, obstetrical brachial plexus injury is the brachial plexus get injured during the time of birth. During the time of birth, what happens? There are many risk factors where the brachial plexus get injured during the birth time. The major risk factors are birth weight. If the baby is more than 4 kgs during birth weight, okay, so it actually if the baby is coming out through the vaginal delivery, normal delivery, what happens, the space for coming out is very less. There it creates more pressure, and the obstetrician, what he does is he pulls the baby, right, which is force from the shoulder. Okay, what happens during the pulling of the baby out of the vaginal canal, there can be rupture or tear of the brachial plexus nerve roots. Okay, this causes obstetrical brachial plexus injury commonly, and it is very common in breech presentation of delivery. Okay, where the leg comes first rather than the head. Okay, so this you can observe in brachial plexus and injury, both traumatic and obstetrical types. So basically, inspection is observation of the patient. So what you inspect for? So always remember, if you are seeing any hand patient, any hand pathological patient, you have to see for 3 Ds. 3 Ds is discoloration of the skin, deformity, disuse atrophy. Okay, just for easy remembrance. And dots, DOTS. That is the D is discoloration, deformity, disuse atrophy. O is for edema. T is for trophic changes. Trophic changes tells about the abnormal sweat, loss of sweating, and loss of hair growth in case of hand pathology, right? And T is trophic changes. S for scars. Scars, there are 2 types of scars. One is the injured scar you can observe in a patient. The other is surgical scars you can observe in a patient. So just remember, we are just observing the patient. In this part, inspection part, we are just observing. By observation, what are the clues which can be elicited by a therapist? So these are the things. Okay, discoloration, deformity, disuse atrophy, trophic changes, scars, and edema. And most important thing, you should always compare with the normal hand. Don't see the affected hand alone. Always compare with the normal hand to differentiate the changes. Okay. Next, coming to the discoloration part. So what are the abnormal discoloration you can see? Okay, so it broadly classifying, you can see redness in a hand, red hands. Okay, basically reddish hands usually what is it, give a clue as clue for us that it is very warm, right? It is what is it, it is infected hand. Okay, it is inflamed hand. The basic signs of inflammation. What are the basic signs of inflammation? Redness, warmth, tenderness, right? And these are the basic signs of inflammation you would have studied in the first year of the physiology subject. So redness, it is a sign of infection. It can be cellulitis. Cellulitis is a bacterial infection of the skin. Okay, so white, and apart from bacterial infection, it can be any infection. Even it can be trauma also. Due to trauma, there will be redness or erythematous skin also, right? White color of the hand indicates usually arterial blockage. Okay, then blue or purple, usually it is due to venous congestions. We tell it as cyanosis, right? Cyanosis is the blue is discoloration of the skin usually, right? Then patches of blue and purple also indicate traumatic hand. Then coming to the black spots and lines. Black spots and lines are sign of malignancy. Okay, and if it is present in the hand, it indicates malignancy of the hand. Okay, so that is termed as melanoma, malignant tumor. So other color producing processes, fungi can produce discoloration. Fungal infection in the hand is known as Tinea manum. What is tinea? Tinea refers to the ringworm shaped reddish patches. Okay, ringworm shaped patches which has raised borders. Okay, and manum is, manus means hand. The scientific term of hand is manus, M-A-N-U-S, manus. So Tinea manum is the fungal infection of the hand. Then viral infections. Apart from this, viral infections can be seen in the hand. Okay, that causes reddish discoloration, scaly skin. Okay, and psoriasis. So very popular psoriasis we can see in feet and in the hands. In feet it is known as plantar psoriasis. In the hand it is known as palmar psoriasis. So psoriatic scaly patches can be seen in the palm of the hand. Okay, so this is usually occurring due to infection when you are touching the hands and the groin, feet and the groin by the patient. Okay, that spreads from the feet and the groin region where the transmission of infection will be there. On to the next part, part. Now deformity part. So what are the deformities, possible deformities which can be observed in the hand? So deformities can be resulting from peripheral nerve injuries. It can result from tendon injuries. It can be resulting from neurological and neuromuscular conditions. Rheumatoid disease also produces deformities, many classical deformities, and painful conditions. So even painful conditions, when the patient has pain in the hand, he adapts an abnormal posture of the hand. That is also a deformity. Okay. Following nerve injuries, these are very common. Okay, these are classical deformities which can be seen. So the left hand side picture, you can see a total claw hand. So total claw hand can be seen commonly in Hansen's disease. So what is Hansen's disease? Hansen's disease is leprosy. Okay, so in leprosy what happens? The median and ulnar nerve both get affected. Okay, usually. So lower level median and ulnar nerve gets affected, which causes clawing deformity. So let me explain about what is clawing deformity. In clawing, there will be hyperextension of the metacarpophalangeal joints, okay, and flexion of the PIP. PIP is proximal interphalangeal joint, and flexion of DIP joint. DIP is distal interphalangeal joint. That is hyperextension of the metacarpophalangeal joint with flexion of PIP and DIP joints. This is the explanation of clawing of fingers. So you can, in leprosy, you can see clawing of all the fingers. Okay, you can see the picture of the leprosy picture in the left hand side. There is clawing of all the fingers. Whereas in the middle pic, it is a ulnar clawing. So ulnar clawing affects only the, it is affected only by ulnar nerve injury. Okay, ulnar nerve injury causes ulnar clawing. Okay, so ulnar nerve injury causes the clawing of ring and little fingers alone. You can see the clawing of ring and little fingers. Okay, so in right hand side picture, it is Wartenberg's sign. What is Wartenberg's sign? It is also a result of ulnar nerve palsy. Okay, so what happens is, due to paralysis of interossei. So interossei is supplied by ulnar nerve, both palmar interossei as well as dorsal interossei. Here, due to paralysis of palmar interossei, okay, palmar interossei, the action is adduction. Okay, so there is loss of adduction, and also due to unopposed action of extensor digiti minimi muscle. So the action of extensor digiti minimi is extension of the little finger and also the abduction of the little finger. So there is unopposed action of extensor digiti minimi. That causes Wartenberg's sign. Next. So ape thumb deformity. It is very popular. Ape thumb deformity. It results from lower median nerve palsy, as you all know. So what is ape thumb deformity? The ape is known as simian, right? Monkeys. So it resembles the hand of a ape, right? So usually our hand, if you see, the thumb is not in the plane with other fingers. It is out of plane. Okay, it is having a more significance. Okay, because the two things which differentiate human species, okay, human species from animal species, higher animal species, is only the thinking capability and also the plane of the thumb. If you see all the lower animals, okay, the thumb will be in line with the fingers. But if you see the human being, the thumb is not in plane with the other fingers. Okay, so it is very significant. Okay, so in this case, there is ape thumb deformity coming scientifically. It is due to loss of abductor pollicis brevis and opponens pollicis. Abductor pollicis brevis and opponens pollicis are thenar muscles. So thenar muscles are supplied by median now. So due to those laws, what happens? The thumb can't abduct and can't oppose. So it adapts a adduction posture. Okay, and unopposed action of adductor pollicis. So it adapts an adduction posture. That is ape thumb deformity. Next is wrist drop deformity. Wrist drop deformity is common in radial nerve palsy. So radial nerve supplies extensors of the wrist. Okay, so if the extensors are paralyzed, what happens? The wrist goes for flexion. Okay, so this causes wrist drop deformity. So we saw the common nerve deformities resulting from nerve injury. Now deformities, common deformities in tendon injuries. I am just briefing out some deformities. These are some deformities, important deformities. So first thing is mallet deformity. Mallet deformity is the deformity which results from the rupture or avulsion of the extensor digitorum communis terminal tendon. Okay, so what is extensor digitorum communis terminal tendon? The extensor digitorum communis inserts at the base of dorsum of the distal phalanx. Okay, base of dorsum of the distal phalanx. So in that insertion site, when it gets injured, okay, when it gets injured, what happens? That injury causes sometimes rupture, or sometimes it avulses along with the chip of bone from the distal phalanx. Okay, that is known as avulsion injury of the distal phalanx along with the extensor digitorum communis tendon. So this causes loss of extension of the distal interphalangeal joint. Okay, so there is flexion of the distal interphalangeal joint in mallet deformity. Next is the Beutner deformity. Beutner deformity occurs due to rupture or any injury to the central slip of the extensor digitorum communis tendon in the digits. Okay, level is at the proximal interphalangeal joint. That central slip is injured. Okay, this causes flexion of the proximal interphalangeal joint and hyperextension of the distal interphalangeal joint, as you see in the picture. So, now we will see the deformities following rheumatoid arthritis. So if you see rheumatoid arthritis, you can see many deformities, okay, combinedly in a single condition. Okay, so what are the common things? So you can see metacarpophalangeal joint swelling, you can, as you see in the clinical picture, and swan neck deformity. Swan neck deformity can be seen in the second picture in the top, right hand side picture on the top. What is that? It is hyperextension of the PIP joint and flexion of the DIP joint. You can see in all the fingers there is hyperextension and of the PIP joint and flexion of the DIP joint. So ulnar deviation at the MCP joint is also seen in rheumatoid arthritis. So yeah, the MCP joints all will be towards the ulnar side. That is, it is ulnar deviated. Okay. So nodules also can be seen along the tendon sheaths. You can see the lower diagram, the bottom diagram. There are nodular formation along the tendon sheath. Okay. So it causes tendon subluxation. So also you can look for osteoarthritic changes. Okay, so if you see any nodes, okay, nodes is nothing but some abnormal growth or nodular growth in the part. Okay, Eberden node is the node which is usually present in the dorsal surface of distal interphalangeal joint. Okay, this suggests osteoarthritis. It is a clue for us. By observing, you can tell that okay, it can be Eberden node. Okay, so it can give a clue that it is osteoarthritis. Okay, the next thing is Boucher's node. You see the right hand side picture, you can see the swollen PIP joint of all the fingers. Okay, so that is Boucher's node. It suggests rheumatoid arthritis. So, Dupuytren's contracture. I assume that you all know about this. Still, I will tell the condition. So, it is the contracture of the palmar fascia. Okay, palmar fascia is the deep fascia of the palm. So, especially the central region of the palmar fascia. So, you can see the left hand side picture. You can see 4 bands going on. So that is the central region of the palmar fascia, which is known as palmar aponeurosis. Okay, which is known as palmar aponeurosis. This palmar aponeurosis, okay, covers the long flexor tendon sheaths. Okay, and then inside the flexor tendon sheath there will be flexor tendons, flexor digitorum superficialis and flexor digitorum profundus, supplying the all the fingers. Okay, so if this is contracted, what happens? It will restrict the gliding of the long flexor tendons. Okay, which will result in flexor contracture, okay, of the metacarpophalangeal joint, proximal interphalangeal joint and distal interphalangeal joint of fingers. Okay, this Dupuytren's contracture is very common in ring and little fingers. Okay, you can see the right hand side picture. It is contracted in the little finger. Apart from the deformities of the nerve injuries, rheumatoid disease, okay, tendon injuries, you can see deformity, okay, orthopedic, any fracture also, okay, any fractures. So this picture depicts the clinical picture of a proximal phalanx fracture patient. Okay, and he got just removed the POP cast. Okay, after immobilization, this picture was taken, right? So you can see the overriding or rotation of the ring finger, okay, over the little finger, right? So what you have to see, or any fracture or any hand with fracture, you should see for symmetry, that is shortening, angulation, rotation, and also you should see for the missing parts. Okay, so shortening, angulation and rotation are seen in fractures, as I told. Rotational alignment always should be checked in full flexion. Okay, only when you do full flexion of all the fingers, you can see the rotational alignment of the fingers, okay, of the affected finger. Here there is malrotation of the ring finger due to proximal phalanx fracture. Now coming on to the, we saw now 2Ds, discoloration is over, okay, deformity is over. Now we are going to disuse atrophy or muscle atrophy. Okay, so muscle atrophy usually is common due to denervation of the muscles, that is due to nerve injuries. So that is known as denervation induced atrophy. So you can see the right hand, the picture in the slide, right? So you can the hand with atrophied muscle. Okay, so this is a picture of carpal tunnel syndrome patient. So you can see the atrophy of the thenar muscles there. Okay, thenar muscles atrophy usually gives a clue for us that there is some median nerve palsy. Okay, there can be one, it can be one of the rationales behind the atrophy. Okay, then hypothenar muscles. If the hypothenar muscle atrophy can be seen in case of ulnar nerve involvement, usually in cubital tunnel syndrome or any cervical spine problem. Cervical spine problem is cervical radiculopathy problem. In long term, not initially, in long term cervical radiculopathy, you can see atrophy. Okay, after 4 years, 5 years, it's not short term atrophy, it happens over a period of time. Okay, then dorsum of hand can be seen for dorsal interossei. Okay, so usually in the dorsum of hand, you can see a hollowing of the spaces between the metacarpal bones. Okay, so what it tells, the dorsal interossei are paralyzed. So where is the situation of dorsal interossei? The dorsal interossei is situated between the metacarpals. Okay, the dorsal aspect. So if those are paralyzed, what happens? There will be hollowing. So you can observe this in ulnar nerve injured patients. Okay, in lower ulnar nerve injured patients. So dorsal web space also should be observed for atrophy. Okay, so you can see the hollowing in case of lower ulnar nerve palsy. That hollowing is due to paralysis of adductor pollicis. Okay, so these are all the common atrophies you can see in the hand. Okay, one you can see for thenar muscles, then hypothenar muscle atrophy, then see for the dorsum of hand for dorsal interosseous atrophy, then you see the first web space or thumb web space, so thumb web area in the dorsum for hollowing, that is for adductor pollicis. We saw the 3Ds in observation. Now trophic changes. Okay, trophic changes represent a derangement of sympathetic nervous system. So, what are the, before going to the derangement or dysfunction of sympathetic nervous system, what are the sympathetic nerve functions? Okay, so there are three functions of the sympathetic nerves: vasomotor, pseudomotor, and pilomotor functions. Okay, so what is vasomotor functions? Vasomotor function is vasoconstriction, okay, of the blood vessels. So that is carried away by sympathetic nerves. Okay, then pseudomotor. What is pseudomotor? Pseudo, S-U-D-O, pseudo is sweat function. Okay, so the sweat function is also carried away by sympathetic nerves. Then third is pilomotor. Pilomotor function is goosebump feeling what we get in case of any excitement. Okay, so that is due to the erection of arrectus pilorum muscle, which is present in the hair follicle root. Okay, so if this muscle is paralyzed, there will be no goosebump feeling. Okay, it is an involuntary muscle. Okay, that is due to sympathetic innervation. Right, these are the three functions which are disturbed in case of derangement. Okay, so as I told, vasoconstriction is lost in case of derangement of the sympathetic nervous system. So what happens? 2 to 3 weeks after denervation, the skin feels warm to touch. Okay, so during the 2 to 3 weeks initially, the skin will be warm to touch after sympathetic paralysis. So after this phase, okay, that is followed by a cold phase. Okay, so initially 2 to 3 weeks, the skin will be rosy, flushed. Flushed is very warm. It is very warm to touch. And after these 3 weeks, the skin will be, the changes will be followed by a cold phase. The hand will be very cold. Okay. So what are the pseudomotor changes? Pseudomotor is, I told you, it is the sweat function. So sweat function is absent in case of denervated hands. Okay. So this sweat function, how it is tested, okay, in the patient. So there are two tests to test the sweat function. One is Orion wrinkle test, and another test is Harrison's tactile addition test. What is Orion wrinkle test? So Orion wrinkle test is performed with the patient dipping the hand, okay, in a basin of water, okay, in a basin of even it can be tap water, okay, in tap water for minimum of 20 minutes. Okay, you should immerse the hand in the basin of water. So after immersing after 20 minutes, after it takes the hand, there will be wrinkles. Usually in normal hands there will be wrinkles forming in the palmar aspect of the skin and the fingers. But in case of sympathetic paralysis, there will be no such wrinkles present. That tells that there is sympathetic paralysis, or there will be no sweating in that hand. Then the other test which can be tested is Harrison's tactile addition test. So Harrison's tactile addition test is tested by keeping a pen in the palmar aspect, as you see in the picture. Just slide the pen. You can see, demonstrate yourself. We can demonstrate. And if you keep the pen and slide along the palm, okay, normally for normal people there will be a frictional force given by the palm, okay, towards the pen. Okay, there will be some friction force given by the palm due to presence of moisture in the skin. Okay, so but this will be absent in case of denervated hands. If you slide in denervated hand, it will go very fast. there will be no frictional force at all. Okay, that you can confirm by Harrison's tactile addition test. Now, pilomotor changes. As I told you, pilomotor changes are abnormal changes where there is loss of goose flesh response in sympathetic paralysis. So, what are the other trophic changes you can see? So, other trophic changes is, so you can see for the skin texture. Okay, the denervated hand will be very soft, smooth, and velvety to touch. Okay, so in chronic cases, it becomes very dry, shiny, and inelastic. Okay, so another point I want to stress is these sympathetic paralysis are more common in traumatic brachial plexus injury, global palsy, where there will be avulsion of all the brachial plexus nerve roots. Okay, so the sympathetic nerve system innervated from T1 level, right? I am aware that you all know T1 level, T1 spinal root level, T1 to lumbosacral nerves. It is the extension. So T1 level, if the T1 level of the spinal nerves is denervated, you can see the sympathetic abnormalities or changes in any condition. So it is more common in traumatic brachial plexus global palsy or any other nerve injuries. Okay. So next we will see the atrophy of the pulp. So what is pulp? Pulp is the tip of the fingers. Okay, there will be bulky portion, rounded portion usually. Normally, we have one rounded portion in the pulp in the tip. Okay, so but if you see the patient with denervated hand, it will be pinpointing pulp. Okay, it is not having a bulk in the pulp. Okay, so what are the other nail changes you can see? You can see for slowed growth of the nail. You can see for increased hardness, and you can see for presence of ridges in the nails. Okay, this will resemble beaks of the birds. Okay, these changes will resemble beaks of the birds. Okay, as it is becoming smaller and curved. Okay, and this is due to decreased vascularity and nutrition to the nail bed. Okay, and as a whole to the hand. Next is the scars. What are the scars you can see? You can see for the injured scars in the patient by observation. You can also see for the surgical scars. Okay, so you can see the picture. In the picture, you can see the surgical scars. Okay, in the left-hand side picture, the middle picture depicts the scar of post-burn contracture. Okay, post-burn contracture scar. Okay, it is an hypertrophic scar. Hypertrophic scar is nothing but it will be raised. So it will be raised from the skin. Okay, and the third scar is surgical scar. Okay, it is the scar of flexor tendon repair. Okay, so what are the domains you have to see in scar? You should see for the nature of the scar. Okay, mature scar and immature scar, whether it is hypertrophic or not, adherent or mobile scar, whether it is tender or it is not non-tender, and also see for the extent of the scar. What are the scar types? So normal scar. Normal scar, look for the extent and location. In normal scar is nothing but it is a adherent scar. Okay, adherent scar is, what is scar? Scar is collection of collagenous tissues. Okay, it is very important for healing of any injury. Okay, any injury is will be healed by scar formation, but this scar shouldn't be very large in what to say collagenous cells. Okay, so normal scar is a bit adherent scar. So look for extent and location, and thumb kneading massage can be given for the scar by the therapist. Okay, to reduce the adherence of the scar to the deep tissues. Then hypertrophic scar. Hypertrophic scar is more common in case of post burns scar, right? In case of burns patient is very common, or in case of any stabbing injury, any traumatic injuries, it's very common. Okay, so no massage can be treated, and it needs compression by silicone gel for the scar to become normal. Okay, so immature scar you can observe for blanching on pressure. If you press the scar, there will be reddishness of the skin, blanching, that is blanching. If you give pressure, there will be erythematous discoloration will be there. The scar is immature in that case. So don't go for massage, give some time for healing of the scar. Then you see for tender scar. What is tender scar? By touch you have pain, that is tender, right? So in that case, don't give massage too vigorously, give a gentle massage, give a gentle circular kneading massage. Okay, so then identify the cause of tenderness also. If neuroma is present, tapping is given. Neuroma is very common in phantom limb, right, where there is amputation of the part. Okay, so if neuroma is present, tapping massage can be given. So, and also ultrasonic massage can be given. So in case of adherent scar, as I told earlier, circular kneading massage can be given. Edema. What is edema? Edema is the collection of interstitial spaces, right? Abnormal collection of interstitial fluid. So edema can be classified into pitting edema and non-pitting edema. Pitting edema, it is seen in acute edema, any traumatic conditions, right? Any trauma, immediately after trauma, immediately post-operatively, right? Even even operation is a trauma, right? It is a surgical trauma. So operatively, at least 3 to 4 days. Definitely, any post-operative condition of hand, the edema is inevitable. Okay, so edema can be seen. Okay, so why it is known as pitting edema? When you press the edema and another thing about edema is always in the dorsum of the hand. Okay, it will not present the palm of the hand, as it is very tightly packed with the tough skin. Dorsum, it is a loose, supple skin, and the edema accumulation is more common in dorsum of the hand. Okay, so when you press the dorsum of the hand, the edema, what happens, there will be a pit formed, and if you take the finger, then it within 2 to 3 seconds the pit will be resolved, and normal shape will be there. Okay, that is pitting edema. It is observed in acute edema. So in case of non-pitting edema, it is a chronic edema where the edema is not drained properly post-operatively or after trauma. This edema will invade all the joint structures, tendon sheets, also in the tendon structures, and it becomes very hard. You can't drain the edema further, and it will result in deformity of the hand, okay, as a whole. So this is a chronic condition edema, non-pitting edema. How the edema is assessed? The edema is assessed by volumetric measurement and also by circumference measurement. You can see in the picture, a patient dips the hand in the container, right? So the water displaced after the patient submerging the hand is measured. Okay, this concept is conceived by Paul Brand in Hansen's disease. Okay, so this is one method. The other method is circumference measurement. Okay, the circumference measurement is use a tape measure to compare the circumference of uninvolved and involved hand and fingers. For tape measure to be accurate, the same anatomical reference point is used for each sequential measurement. After the end of the session, I will demonstrate you about the edema measurement. So palpation. Now we finished the observation part. We saw the discoloration, deformity, disuse atrophy, edema, trophic changes, and scars. Okay. Now palpation part. So palpation part of hand examination. Check for masses. Masses are lymph nodes and ganglions. You can palpate and see. Okay. You can palpate if there is lymph nodes and ganglions. And temperature abnormalities can be palpated, right? If there is heat of the hand, the heat is felt in the hand. Okay. So it gives us a clue that there can be infection, any inflammation, and it can be due to trauma, right? It is a basic understanding. Then if the hands are cold, it tells that there is definitely vascular pathology. Okay. Then also see for areas of tenderness. The most important part of our examination, motor examination. Motor examination is movement examination, simple terms. So what are the movements to be examined? So any patient comes to your clinic for hand after a hand injury or any hand abnormality, okay, you just first ask him to bend and stretch his fingers first. Simply ask him to flex and extend his fingers, and also ask him to oppose his thumb to the other fingers. Okay, this is the thing you have to ask him to do. Okay, if he is able to do all the movements smoothly, okay, 90% of abnormality is ruled out. Okay, that tells that he is almost 90% normal. More than 90% is normal, his hand. Okay, then see for any loss of the digit, any standing out of the digit, any rotational deformity of the digit, as in fractures. See for the flexor cascade. Okay, what is flexor cascade? Flexor cascade is when you flex the fingers normally, it is not in a straight line. If you can see now, just flex and see the fingers, it is not in a straight line. So it converges towards scaphoid tubercle. Okay, converges towards all the fingers, converges towards a common point. That common point is scaphoid tubercle, which is in the base of the thenar eminence. Okay, this is the normal flexor cascade. Okay, so this will be disturbed in case of abnormal hands. Okay, you should check for this. In case of malrotation, in fractures of the digits, okay, this causes the affected finger to deviate from the flexor cascade, right? So this causes abnormal flexor cascade. Then, as I told you earlier, ask the patient to normally flex and extend his fingers. Ask him to do normal opposition of the thumb with the other fingertips. Okay. Then, so yeah, while examining, you can observe also the attitude of the fingers. Okay, even before examining, even in observation, you can see these deformities. Okay, so in case there is standing out of a single finger, standing out is the finger is extended, as in the clinical picture in the slide. Okay, the index finger is extended there, right? The other three fingers are flexed. Okay, when you ask the patient to flex all the fingers and one finger alone stands out, as in the case of the picture, what it gives is, it gives a clue to us that is flexor tendons are abnormal, or it is some weakness or injury has happened to his flexor tendons. Okay, some abnormality of the flexor tendons. Tendon is there. Flexor tendon of the index finger, as in the clinical picture. What are the flexor tendon? Flexor tendon superficialis and flexor tendon profundus, long flexor tendons. Okay, it is a clue for us. Okay, then, so yeah, you can see in the right picture, this is due to avulsion of flexor tendon profundus. FDP is flexor tendon profundus. You can see the middle finger standing out there in the picture. Okay. Then the important part, muscles of the hand. What are the muscles of the hand? So for clinical examination of the hand, we follow this chart. Okay, for ease of examination. So we broadly classify the muscles into intrinsic muscles and extrinsic muscles. So intrinsic muscles are the muscles which get originated in the hand and which get inserted in the hand. These are very small muscles, right? Small and flat muscles. What are extrinsic muscles? So extrinsic muscles are long muscles which get origin other than the hand, not in the hand. It may be in the elbow region, or it may be in the forearm region, the origin, but get inserted into the hand. These are extrinsic muscles. Okay, so clear. So now we can further subclassify them. Okay, we can subclassify them into thumb intrinsics, thumb extrinsics, finger intrinsics and finger extrinsics. What are the thumb intrinsics? APB is abductor pollicis brevis, OP is opponens pollicis, FPB is flexor pollicis brevis, AP is adductor pollicis. And then coming on to the extrinsics. Extrinsics are flexor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis, abductor pollicis longus. Right? These are the extrinsics of the thumb. Then fingers, coming on to finger intrinsics. Finger intrinsics are 4 lumbricals, interossei. Interossei are divided into dorsal interossei 4 and volar interossei 3. Right? And finger extrinsics are FDS is flexor digitorum superficialis, FDP is flexor digitorum profundus, EDC is extensor digitorum communis, EIP is extensor indicis proprius, EDM is extensor digiti minimi. Right? So then apart from this there are hypothenar muscles. Hypothenar muscles are abductor digiti minimi, flexor digiti minimi and opponens digiti minimi. Okay, these are the muscles of the hand. Now we will see the individual testing of the muscles. So I will brief out all the individual testing. You should test for individual muscles for a accurate diagnosis of motor examination. Right? So how will you examine? The first muscle is thumb intrinsics, abductor pollicis brevis. So abductor pollicis brevis action is palmar abduction of the thumb. Right? So how will you test? It is tested by a pen test. So keep the hand always while examining the hand should be placed flat in the table. Okay, it should be placed flat in the table so that it is stabilized, well stabilized. Okay, and how will you test for abductor pollicis brevis? You do with that pen test. Keep a pen on the top of the hand. Okay, ask the patient to touch the pen. Okay, ask the patient to touch the pen by abducting the thumb. Okay, that is the test for abductor pollicis brevis. The nerve supply is median nerve. Okay, the nerve supply is median nerve. Next is flexor pollicis brevis. Flexor pollicis brevis action is flexion of the metacarpophalangeal joint of the thumb. So you can see the hand placement in the right hand side of the picture. Okay, so as the patient stabilize all the proximal segments. Proximal segments are stabilize the metacarpal bones with one hand and ask the patient to flex the metacarpophalangeal joint alone. Okay, so this is the isolated action of flexor pollicis brevis. The nerve supply, it has dual nerve supply. It is supplied by ulnar nerve as well as the median nerve. Okay, this. Okay, what is the action of opponens pollicis? It is the opposition of the thumb to the other fingertips. Okay, that is the action. Nerve supply is median nerve. Yeah. Adductor pollicis. What is the action? Adduction of the thumb. You can see in the picture the patient adducts the thumb, right? So you can see the bulk in the dorsum of the first web area, right? As you see a pointer showing in the dorsum of the hand in the slide, right? So that is the bulkier part of the dorsum by adductor pollicis. So what is the test? The test is book test. So ask the patient to hold the book, right? And the therapist will be in front. The therapist will try to pull the book, okay? And the patient should hold the book, okay? In case the adductor pollicis is paralyzed, what happens is the patient adapts a flexion of DIP joint, flexion of distal interphalangeal joint for holding the book when it is pulled out away from the patient, right? So this is known as Froment's sign. It is a classical sign in case of ulnar nerve palsy. It is used to rule out ulnar nerve palsy. right? So the test name is book test. The sign is Froment sign. This is supplied by Ulnar now. Adductor policy is supplied by Ulnar now. We are going to see the thumb extrinsics. Till now we saw the thumb intrinsics. Thumb intrinsics are nothing but the thenar muscles. Okay. Now we are going to see the thumb extrinsics. What are the thumb extrinsics? Extrinsics, as I told you earlier, they are long muscles, okay, originating from the elbow or the forearm and inserting into the hand. Here the thumb intrinsics insert into the thumb ray, right? So what are the muscles? The first muscle is flexor pollicis longus. What is the action? Flexor pollicis longus makes the IP joint flex. Flexion of the IP joint is the action. You have only one IP joint in the thumb. It flexes the IP joint of the thumb. How to test? Stabilize the proximal flanks of the thumb and other proximal segments. Okay, it is stabilized by the therapist, and the patient actively flexes the IP joint of the thumb. Okay, if we can't do, it is paralyzed. If we can't do the desired action, the muscle is paralyzed. The nerve supply is anterior interosseous branch of median nerve. Flexor pollicis longus. This is in the extensor compartment, right? Flexor pollicis longus is in the flexor compartment. This is in the extensor compartment. So flexor pollicis longus, as the name depicts, it is a long muscle of the extensor compartment. Okay, and it inserts into the distal flanks, dorsum of the distal flanks. Okay, so what is the action? Extension of the IP joint of the thumb. Okay, extension of the IP joint of the thumb. How will you test it? So keep the hand over the table, okay, dorsum facing upwards as you see in the picture. Ask the patient to lift the thumb up. Okay, lift the thumb up. You can see the tendon easily. Okay, you can do it now also. You just do the extension of the thumb. You can see the tendon also, the prominent tendon. You can palpate and see when you are doing extension of the thumb. Nerve supply is posterior interosseous branch of radial nerve. Next muscle is extensor pollicis brevis. So what is the action of extensor pollicis brevis? The extensor pollicis brevis extends the MCP joint of the thumb, that is metacarpophalangeal joint extension is done by extensor pollicis brevis. Okay, so what is the nerve supply? Same, posterior interosseous branch of radial nerve. Okay, how to test this muscle? So while testing, you should the therapist should flex the IP joint of the thumb. It should therapist should keep the IP joint of the thumb flexed. Okay, and ask the patient to do the MCP joint extension alone. Okay, so why this is the IP joint is flexed? To knock out the action of extensor pollicis longus. Got it? We are going to isolate the action of extensor pollicis brevis. That's why we are flexing the IP joint of the thumb and asking the patient to extend the MCP joint of thumb. Okay, so this is the action and testing. The nerve supply is posterior interosseous branch of radial nerve. Next muscle is adductor pollicis longus. Okay, this is also an important muscle, right, clinically. So as name implies, the action is abduction of the thumb ray. Abduction of the thumb ray at carpometacarpal joint. Okay, abduction of the thumb ray at carpometacarpal joint. So thumb ray, what is thumb ray? Thumb ray is nothing but thumb along with the first metacarpal. Okay, it is jointly called as thumb ray. Thumb along with the first metacarpal is known as thumb ray. So the action is abduction of the thumb ray at the CMC joint, right? And how to test it? So ask the patient to radially abduct. Okay, you can see the position of the hand in the picture. The patient is asked to radially abduct the thumb. Okay, so that is the action. So what is the nerve supply? Posterior interosseous branch of radial nerve. bony landmarks and also the tendinous landmarks in the picture. In the left hand side picture, a pointer is there. A pointer is on the abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis. That is the tendon. Both tendons are present in that pointer level. Abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis. Okay, that is the first extensor compartment. Okay, lateral most border of the wrist. Okay, the anatomical snuff box is present medial to that border. You can see the anatomical snuff box, and the medial border, that prominent border, you can see the tendon. That tendon is extensor pollicis longus, long tendon. Okay, it is a clinical significant landmark. Okay, so in case of scaphoid fracture, these all tendons will be affected. Abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis, and extensor pollicis longus will be affected. And also, in case of de Quervain's disease, I think you are aware of that. In de Quervain's disease, it is the disease of tenosynovitis of extensor pollicis brevis and abductor pollicis longus muscles, right? Lumbrical muscles. So, what is the unique thing of lumbrical muscle? It gets originated from a tendon, it gets inserted into a tendon. Usually muscles gets originated from a bone and gets inserted into a bone, right? But in case of lumbricals, it is the only muscle which gets originated in the tendon, that is flexor digitorum profundus tendon in the palm, right? And gets inserted into extensor expansion in the fingers, right? So how many lumbricals you have? 4 lumbricals. It is numbered from lateral to medial side. So first, second, third and fourth lumbrical. First lumbrical for the index finger, second lumbrical for the middle finger, third lumbrical for the ring finger, and fourth lumbrical for the little finger, right? Yes. So first and second lumbrical supplied by median nerve, third and fourth lumbrical supplied by ulnar nerve. So how will you test lumbrical? So what is the action? So action of lumbrical is flexion of metacarpophalangeal joints of the all fingers. Flexion of metacarpophalangeal joints of the all fingers. You should ask the patient to do a cobra sign. That just ask him to flex all the fingers like a cobra, like a snake, right? So that is known as cobra sign for lumbrical testing. So just ask him to flex all the fingers together. Okay. So next is dorsal and volar interossei. So both dorsal and volar interossei are innervated by ulnar nerve. There are 4 dorsal interossei and 3 volar interossei. Okay, 4 dorsal interossei for corresponding each finger, and 3 volar interossei. There are only 3 volar interossei. It's not 4. One for the index finger, one for the ring finger, and one for the little finger. Okay, middle finger you can't adduct. I hope you understand. Middle finger you can only abduct. You can't adduct, right? So it is the midline. So how will you test? The test is by paper test. Okay, the test name is paper test for testing both dorsal and volar interossei. Okay, the therapist inserts a paper, okay, in between the fingers, okay, in between all fingers, and he instructs the patient to just make hold of the hold of the paper, okay, when he inserts the paper in between the fingers. If he can hold the paper, okay, his dorsal and volar interossei are intact. Okay, if he can't hold and it is very free to insert and take between the fingers, it tells that there is weakness or paralysis of dorsal and volar interossei. Okay. Next muscle is flexor digitorum superficialis. So what is the action of flexor digitorum superficialis? So flexor digitorum superficialis is a finger extrinsic muscle. Extrinsic is long muscle, right? In the fingers, 4 fingers. So 4 fingers have 4 flexor digitorum superficialis muscle. Remember that. Okay. So what is the action? The action is flexion of the PIP joint of all fingers. PIP joint is proximal interphalangeal joint of all fingers. Okay, so what is the nerve supply? Nerve supply is median nerve. Okay, now we will see the testing. So in the clinical picture in the slide, you can see the therapist stabilizing the index, ring and little fingers in extension, right? So he holds index, ring and little fingers in extension, whereas the middle finger is flexed. Okay, so the middle fingers is tested in that case. Okay, so in the picture the middle finger is tested. Okay, all the other fingers are extended. Okay, and then the patient is asked to flex the middle finger. So in that case, if it is normal, okay, if the if the muscle is intact, what happens is there will be flexion of the PIP joint. There will be flexion of the PIP joint, and there will be flyal distal phalanx. You can test now while I'm explaining. Just support all the other fingers in extension and just flex the tested finger. Okay, you can only flex the PIP joint. The distal interphalangeal joint can't be flexed. It will be flyal. If you touch now, it will be like flyal distal phalanx, very loose. That is known as floating phalanx. Floating phalanx. That phenomenon is known as floating phalanx. It is very flyal. That this distal phalanx is very flyal. That sign is known as floating phalanx. This is present in normal individuals. Okay, so in case of paralysis, what happens? The patient can't even flex the PIP joint. Okay, so this is the test. So FDS of index finger. So why you want to test the FDS of index finger? So as I told you earlier, FDS finger is for all the 4 fingers. Index finger has 1 FDS, middle finger 1 FDS, ring finger 1 FDS, and little finger 1 FDS. 4 fingers have 4 FDS muscle, right? But the FDS of index finger is from a separate muscle belly. Okay, so we have to test it separately. So how to test it? You just adapt a buttonhole deformity. Buttonhole deformity is flexion of the PIP joint of the finger, index finger, and hyperextension of the DIP joint. You can see in the picture, right? If the patient can do that, his FDS is intact. Then FDP. Okay, what is FDP? FDP, flexor digitorum profundus. It is also a long flexor muscle, and it is a deep long flexor muscle. Okay, flexor digitorum profundus means literally deep. So it is a deep muscle. It is deep to flexor digitorum superficialis. So what is the action? The action is flexion of the DIP joint. Okay, FDS action is flexion of the PIP joint. Here the action is flexion of the DIP joint. What is the nerve supply? You remember the FDP supplying the index and middle finger. Okay, FDP of the index and middle finger supplied by the median nerve. FDP of the ring and little finger is supplied by the ulnar nerve. Okay, yes. So how to test this? So testing is stabilize all the proximal segments, bony segments, and ask the patient to flex the DIP joint. Okay, that is the muscle testing. Okay, the next muscle is extensor digitorum communis. So EDC, it is known as EDC, extensor digitorum communis, the extensor aspect of the forearm and the hand. So what is the action? The action is extension of the metacarpophalangeal joint of all fingers. Okay, there are 4 EDC tendons for each finger, right? So what is the action? Extension of the metacarpophalangeal joint of each finger. Okay, so how will you test this? So you can see the right hand side of a clinical picture. There is extension of the finger, but provided there should be flexion of PIP and DIP joints. So while doing extension of the MCP joint, you should always flex the PIP and DIP joint and do extension. Okay, why? What is the reason? we are going to knock out the action of finger intrinsics. Okay, if you are doing without flexing the PIP and DIP joint, that will create the muscle contraction of the finger intrinsics also. Okay, so that's why we are flexing the PIP and DIP joint and doing the extension of the finger. What is the nerve supply? The nerve supply is radial nerve. The next two muscles are extensor indicis proprius and extensor digiti minimi. So extensor indicis, as the name implies, it is the extensor of the index finger. Okay, simply remember. And extensor digiti minimi is what? It is the little finger, extensor of the little finger. So we are going to test the extension of the index finger and also extension of the little finger. So what is the classical sign to test these two muscles combinedly? The classical sign is horn sign. You can see the bottom picture, clinical picture. It is a sign of a horn, right? So it is known as horn sign, HORN, horn sign, right? Ask the patient or the client to adapt this posture, right? If he is able to do this posture, his extensor indicis and extensor digiti minimi are intact. Okay, if he fails to adapt this posture, definitely the corresponding muscles are paralyzed. Okay, so the nerve supply is radial nerve. These two muscles are supplied by radial nerve. So we saw all the other muscles. Now we are testing for hypothenar muscles. So what are the hypothenar muscles? Abductor digiti minimi, opponens digiti minimi. So simple. So we have to do the little finger action. What are the little finger action? You do abduction as you see in the picture, right? Abduction of the little finger. If you see, do your abduction, you can see a dimpling of the hypothenar eminence. Okay, you can see a contraction seen in the hypothenar eminence when you are doing abduction. That is by abductor digiti minimi, and also you can do flexor digiti minimi. Flexor digiti minimi action is flexion of the metacarpophalangeal joint. Okay, flex the little finger at the metacarpophalangeal joint. That is the action testing of flexor digiti minimi. And the opponens digiti minimi action is opposition of the little finger to the thumb. Okay, opposition of the little finger to the thumb. If you oppose, the opponents will be acting. So these three muscles are supplied by the ulnar nerve. Okay, got it? We saw all the muscle action. Okay, we saw all the muscle action starting from thumb intrinsics, then thumb extrinsics, finger intrinsics, and finger extrinsics. Right? Now, functional muscle strength. How to do that? Functional muscle strength can be tested by pinch dynamometer and grip dynamometer. Okay. So, what are the functional strength should be tested? Pinch. What are the pinches to be tested? Commonly tested pinch are tip to tip pinch, tip to tip pinch, pulp to pulp pinch, and lateral or key pinch. Okay, tip to tip pinch, pulp to pulp pinch, lateral or key pinch. Okay, this should be tested. Okay, then in case of gripping, you are going to test gripping by grip dynamometer. The standardized grip dynamometer is Jamar dynamometer. Okay, it is standardized and it is recommended by American Society of Surgeons of Hand. Okay, then so yes, how will you test these procedures? Okay, so for pinch, you have to test tip to tip pinch, pulp to pulp pinch, and key pinch. Okay, for each pinch, 3 trials are made. Okay, for each pinch, 3 trials are made, and average of 3 trials are recorded. Okay, and always it is done in the normal side as well. Okay, so same way in case of grip strength, how it is tested? The patient is made sat without arm rest. Okay, without arm rest, and his shoulder is adducted. Okay, elbow flexed to 90 degree, forearm in the mid prone position. Okay, wrist in neutral, and ask the patient to voluntarily press the dynamometer with maximum force in this position. Okay, so and in this gripping also you have to do 3 trials. Okay, alternating with affected hand and normal hand. Suppose if you are doing with affected hand first gripping, then after one grip, then do with the normal hand. Okay, alternate with the normal hand, then with the second trial with the affected hand. So complete these 3 trials with affected hand and normal hand. The average of 3 trials is recorded. Okay, range of motion. So range of motion is usually measured by finger goniometer, and the placement of goniometer, dorsal placement is always convenient. Okay, as you see in the picture. Okay, the anatomical position of the joint is considered as 0 degree, as recommended by American Society of Surgeons for Hand, and extension measurement is recorded as a positive number. So this is the ROM chart in hand clinics. This is a simple chart, easy to examine by this chart. So usually what is active ROM? Active range of motion indicates excursion of musculotendinous unit. Okay, passive range of motion indicates joint integrity. Joint integrity is nothing but the structures of the joint, such as capsule, ligaments, right? They integrity. Okay, it shows their integrity. And you can see the active range of motion and passive motion range of motion are measured in all the joints: metacarpophalangeal joint, proximal interphalangeal joint, that is PIP, and distal interphalangeal joint, that is DIP, of all the fingers and thumb. Then measurement of first web space. So when you are documenting a hand patient, you should also measure the first web space. Why it is important? Because it is functionally significant. Any movement of the hand, the thumb movement will be there. Without thumb movement, you can't perform any hand activity. Okay, so thumb movement requires a good physiological web space, right? Thumb web space. So you have to measure the thumb web space, right? It can be measured by goniometer. It can be seen in radiological findings, and also there are some prefabricated templates for measuring first web space angle in hand clinics. I will show you at the end of the session. I have the templates. Okay. Now we completed all the motor examination part. Okay, now switching on to the sensory examination part. So before going to sensory examination, we have to know about the briefly about the sensory distribution of the nerves to the hand. So what are the nerve distribution of the hand? Ulnar nerve, median nerve, and radial nerve. Okay, these are the 3 nerves of the distribution of the hand. So median nerve supplies the lateral 2/3 of the palm along with the lateral 3.5 fingers. Okay, got it? Lateral 3.5 fingers in the palmar aspect. Ulnar nerve supplies the medial 1/3 of the palm along with the medial 1.5 fingers in the palmar aspect, and also in the dorsal aspect. Okay, not only in the palm, also in the dorsal 1/3. Also it is covered by ulnar nerve. Radial nerve supplies the dorsal aspect in the lateral 2/3 of the dorsum. Okay, lateral 2/3 of the dorsum, okay, of the hand, along with the lateral 3.5 fingers, but it's not the complete fingers till the PIP joint of the fingers. Okay, till the PIP joint in the dorsum of the fingers. The tips, the tips till the PIP joint is supplied by the median nerve. The dorsum of the fingers till the PIP joint is supplied by the median nerve. Okay, just for basic understanding. Autonomous zone. So autonomous zone is the area of absolute sensory loss. For any nerve injury, okay, if you are suspecting for any nerve injury, okay, you just go to these areas and test first to confirm. Okay, so if you are suspecting for median nerve injury, test the palmar aspect of index finger sensation. Okay, if the palmar aspect of index finger sensation is lost or it is diminished, you can suspect for median nerve injury. If there is loss of sensation or diminished sensation in palmar aspect of little finger, you can suspect for ulnar nerve injury. If you if there is loss of sensation or diminished sensation in the area on dorsum of metacarpophalangeal joint of thumb, you can suspect for radial nerve injury. Okay. Assessment. So the basic assessment of the sensation in the hand. Threshold test, innervation density test, and objective tests. What is threshold test? Threshold test assess the single nerve fiber, the innervates receptor. It is a more sensitive test than innervation density test in detecting early nerve damage. What are the modalities tested in threshold test? Pain is tested, light touch is tested, temperature and vibration are tested. How they are tested? So, Von Frey air test is, and Sames Weinstein test is for testing the light touch. Okay, variable amplitude vibrometer is for vibration, and as I think you know about the pain testing. Pain is usually tested by pin pricking. Okay, with the patient's eyes closed, and temperature is tested by using two test tubes, warm test tubes between temperature between 40 to 45 degrees Celsius, and cold test tubes between the temperatures 15 to 20 degree Celsius. I hope you know that. Then innervation density test. Innervation density test measures the innervation of multiple overlapping receptors. Okay, and what is the modalities we are testing? We are testing for 2-point discrimination. Okay, and what are the objective tests in sensory assessment? Ninnitrine sweat test, iodine starch test, bromophenol test, cobalt chloride test, quinazarin test, and wrinkle test. So usually in routinely tested modalities are pain and touch. So pain is tested by pin prick with the patient's eye closed. We are going to test the palm of the hand first because it is the area of more sensory fibers, palm and the finger. Okay, in the palmar aspect. Okay, with the patient's eye closed, and always compare with the normal hand when you are testing the affected hand. Compare with the normal hand. Okay, so ask the patient whether he is feeling the pin prick sensation, whether he is feeling the normal the sensation as the normal hand, or it is less than the sensation of the normal hand, or the sensation is very high, that is hyperesthesia, or the sensation is lost. Lost sensation is termed as anesthesia. So we are going to document like this. Okay, so then the middle slide is about the touch sensation. It is tested in the past like that in brush. Okay, but now the standardized testing in hand clinics is by Sims Weinstein monofilaments. You can see in the right hand side of the slide. Okay, that is a Sims Weinstein monofilament tested in the fingertip. Anyway, I will demonstrate at the end. Just observe what I tell. Always while testing, stabilize the hand in the putti. Why your putti is therapeutic? Why you are stabilizing? To restrict the movement of the hand. Okay, and it should be tested in a perpendicular fashion of 1 to 1.5 seconds until it makes a C shape. It is pressed over the patient's tip. Okay, it is tested in fingertips alone. Okay, then it is applied for 3 times with the patient's eye closed. Okay, the patient eye should be closed when testing. Start with the thin filament first. There are totally 4 Sims monofilaments. Thin filament should be started first. Okay, and if it is not felt, proceed with the thicker one. The thickest filament is 6.65 in diameter, and it should be pressed only 1 time. Okay, if not felt, it tells that it is an anesthetic hand. Okay, so as I told you earlier, it is testing of the fingertips. Okay, and gradually progress to the palm from the fingertips. Okay, proceed to the dorsum of the hand also. So documentation you can see. So normal is the green color. Okay, the green color applied is normal. the diagram. So normal, that is the thin filament tested. Green filament is the thin filament. Okay, the second filament, second thick filament is blue color. That tells that there is diminished protective sensation. Okay. So these are the filament sizes and colors. Okay, we start with green color. If the patient feels with the green color with the eyes closed, okay, this is the thinnest filament, is normal. If he can't feel with the eyes closed, we then go to the blue filament. Okay, that tells that his light touch is diminished. And even if he can't feel with the blue filament, we go to the purple filament. If he feels with the purple filament, there is diminished protective sensation. Even if we can't feel with the purple filament, then progress to the red filament. Proceed with the red filament. Red filament is the thickest filament. Okay. If we can't feel with the red filament, there is anesthesia in the hand, or there is loss of protective sensation. This is the way we have to test the light touch. 2-point discrimination. So 2-point discrimination is the functional sensation actually. Okay, it is the functional sensation testing. So there are 2-point discrimination. There are two types: static 2PD and moving 2PD. How it is tested? It is tested by a discriminator. This tool is known as discriminator. You can see in the picture, right? So these are the normal 2PD values which you can see. TPX is terminal phalanx. For terminal phalanx, 4 mm distance. 4 mm is the distance between the two prongs of the discriminator. Okay, and for MPX is middle phalanx 5 mm. For proximal phalanx 6 mm. Then palm distal to the DPC is distal palmar crease 7 mm. Palm proximal to the DPC is 8 mm. These are the normal values. Discrimination. So usually moving 2PD recovers faster than static 2PD after any nerve repair. Okay, after any nerve repair. So moving 2PD should be tested first. Okay, you can see the picture of 2PD testing over the patient in fingertips. Okay, hand fully supported, palm facing up, vision should be occluded, test on the fingertips. Okay, as it is manipulated more. While testing, alternate with 2 points and single point. Moving 2PD start with 8 mm to 2 mm. That is, you have to start with the larger distance 2PD, then to the smaller distance, that is 2 mm. Okay, it is a very lengthy process. So test on the ulnar and radial side of the digit for digital nerves proximal to the two distal fingertip. First start from the fingertip, okay, and it should be parallel to the finger. Okay, then only it can test for a specific nerve. It shouldn't be transverse direction. It should be in a parallel to the finger in the longitudinal direction. Eye should be closed. Ask the patient whether he feels 1 or 2 points. Okay, so 7 out of 10 trials is correct. If the patient can elicit 7 responses correct, if the patient can give 7 correct responses while testing out of 10, his sensation is intact. Then move to the lesser distance 2PD. Okay, that is to 7 mm. Pressure, how much pressure should be given while testing? Don't press hard or don't barely touch. It should be moderate pressure should be given. Static 2PD starts with a 5 mm distance. How to test it? The same procedure, but here the discriminator is not moved. Okay, it is static. Just press 2 points and 1 point alternatively while testing. Okay, if the response is inaccurate, increased. So 2PD by American Society of Surgery of the Hand. The normal 2PD is less than 6 mm, fair is 6 to 10 mm, 4 is greater than 11 to 15 mm. If only 1 point is perceived while testing by the patient, it is known as only protective sensation is there. If both points can't be perceived by the patient while testing, it is anesthetic hand. We use this chart in hand clinic for documentation of sensation. Okay, there you can see normal, in the boxes written normal sensation, anesthetic sensation, hyperesthetic sensation, and hypoesthetic sensation. Okay, that you document in the sensory chart. It is more accurate with this chart. Okay, where the grid is divided into 7 Palmar zones. The transverse lines corresponds to the flexion grease, and the longitudinal lines corresponds to the raise of the hand. Other testing we used to test for prehension also. Okay, so for prehension we go for Moberg's pickup test. Indications are for prehension and also for median and or combined median and ulnar nerve injuries. This Moberg's pickup test is performed, okay, for seeing the functional sensation is tested by this Moberg pickup test. Okay, so items such as screw, key, nail, large nut, washer, safety spin, and small nut, paper clip, these are objects of ADL use, right? So these are used for testing. How to do this procedure? Okay, ask the patient to pick up each item, okay, pick up each item and transfer to a container in opposite to him, okay, and transfer it, pick up it and just drop it into another container, okay, container of the item. Okay, so the instruction given are the patient shouldn't slide the object when taking, and he shouldn't use the 4th and 5th digits. Okay, so first the patient starts with the eyes open, okay, with both affected and unaffected hands, then with the affected hand with eyes closed. Okay, so this is very significant in case of functional performance of the patient and in testing of functional sensation. Okay, this is also timed. This test is also timed. Moberg's pickup test is further modified by Dellon. Okay, that is known as Dellon's modification of Moberg's pickup test. Okay, so there standardized objects, the same procedure, but standardized objects are used for picking up the objects, right? So here the progression is the patient asked to pick the object, okay, and identify the object by just touching it and manipulating it, okay, with eyes closed. That is recognizing the shape, size and texture of the object with eyes closed. This is known as stereognosis. Okay, so this is a progression of the Moberg's pickup test. Moberg's pickup test by the patient. He is picking a nut, isn't it, with eyes closed, and he is going to transfer to a container. Pattern of sensory recovery. So first, after any nerve repair of the hand, whether it may be ulnar nerve or median nerve or radial nerve, the first sensation to be recovered is pain. Okay, and it is the order of recovery of sensation. First pain is recovered, then moving touch is recovered, then constant touch is recovered, then static 2PD, moving 2PD is recovered, then static 2PD is recovered. This is the order of sensory recovery. So how the hand gets nutrition? Through blood supply, right? So in the forearm, radial and ulnar arteries are there. After entering the hand, it divides into arches, arterial arches in the hand. These two arteries divide into arterial arches, and in the palm, and before entry into the fingers or digits, these arches divided into digital arteries, lateral and medial digital arteries for each finger, right, and also for the thumb. There are two digital arteries for each finger, lateral and medial digital arteries to supply the fingers also. Okay. For testing the circulation of the hand, a simple test, this is known as Hallen's test. So ask the patient to make a fist as you see in the picture, and then the examiner occludes both arteries at the level of wrist. Radial artery is present in the radial side of the wrist. Ulnar artery is present in the ulnar side of the wrist. You can press and palpate the pulse also before exactly keeping the position. Okay. Then the patient releases the fist in the second picture. After releasing, what happens? The examiner then releases one artery. Okay, as you see in the picture, last picture, and observes for the refill of the palm. Okay, normally if we do the procedure, the refill is within 5 seconds. Okay, the refill of the blood in the palm will be within 5 seconds. But in case of vascular abnormality, this refilling of the palm with blood supply is lost. That shows that there is vascular abnormality. Okay, so this is about vascular abnormality testing. So this is about the presentation, and now I want to give some demonstration of the things which I took now. So first we saw about the edema measurement, right? So edema measurement can be measured objectively and also by circumference measurement. So objectively, you know, by immersing or submerging the container, water container. Now we are going to I am going to demonstrate the circumferential measurement of the edema in the dorsum of the hand. Usually the edema will be in the dorsum of the hand after any hand pathology. Okay, I will demonstrate you with the tape. So you can see a tape here. This is the demonstration of edema in the dorsum of the hand. I start with the tape in the ulnar styloid process. Okay, I start with the tape in the ulnar styloid process. Then I go to the radial styloid process. Okay, and I wind it to the radial styloid process, and then I wind it to the fifth metacarpophalangeal joint. Then wind it to the palmar aspect, and come to the dorsum, aspect, right, and then end to the starting point of the ulnar styloid process. So this is the testing of this is a figure of 8 edema measurement. Start from the ulnar styloid, okay, in the palmar aspect, go to the radial styloid, okay, wind the tape over towards the second metacarpal bone in the palm, second metacarpophalangeal joint in the palm. Then wind it across, then go to the fifth metacarpophalangeal joint, then go to the starting point, in the ulnar styloid process. This is a figure of 8 edema measurement for measuring edema in the dorsum of the hand. Okay, so this is a most accurate measurement in the edema measurement, and you can see online YouTube also for knowing more about this. Okay. So then coming to the finger measurement, digital measurement, for digital edema measurement, we usually do in this crease, PIP joint crease. This is the PIP joint skin crease. We usually wind it and measure it over this skin crease, right, in the PIP joint crease, right. This is the measurement of digital edema, right. So this is about edema. And also the hand, generally while observation, I told you, apart from observation of what I told about trophic changes, the pulp, this is the pulp of the fingers. Usually you can see the pulp, there is a bulkier part. This is the pulp for us normally. In case of hand patients, in case of denervated hands, you can see a flattening of the pulp. It will not be round, it will be flattened. Okay, that is one observation you can see clinically. Another observation is, I told you, the nails will be very narrow, it will be ridged. The ridges will be there in nails, and it will be very dry in texture, the nails, and it will be beaked, convex shape, like a bird's beak. Okay, in denervated hands, nail changes you can see. And also, what are these lines? These lines are known as creases, right? It's palmar creases. This crease is known as distal palmar crease, what I touching. And This crease is known as proximal palmar crease, right? Proximal palmar crease. This is known as thenar crease, right? This is known as thenar crease. This is known as thenar crease, covering the thenar eminence. So these creases will be obliterated, will be reduced, okay, in case of nerve injuries, denervation, okay, especially in sympathetic nerve injury. These creases will be vanishing. They will not be visible at all. They will be reduced in appearance. Very reduced creases will be there. So sometimes in long-term cases there will be loss of creases also. Okay, these creases and also the digital creases will be vanishing in case of denervated hands. Okay, so what are the thing? Flexor cascade I showed you. Flexor cascade is when you are flexing the finger. See, it is not in a straight line. It goes towards the scaphoid tubercle. This is the scaphoid tubercle. Scaphoid bone is here. It converges, all the fingers converges toward the scaphoid tubercle, right? So this is the normal flexor cascade. Okay, it should be seen in any hand examination. Okay, then about examination, then you have to see the, I told you the templates for first thumb web space. There are, these are standard templates written, no, degrees 60, 40, and see 30. These are standard templates for the measuring the thumb web space. So what we do, we ask the patient to expand the abduct the thumb, okay, and keep the web space angle here, okay, and measure. It is easy for measurement. So it shows that if we can do till this, it is of 60 degree. If it is very reduced, it is very contracted, we go for the lower one. We go for the lower one, which is now 10 degree. So you can measure with this. This is a template for measuring thumb web space angle. Okay, it's very important, functional important. Then goniometry measurement. So goniometry measurement, as I told, it should be only in the dorsal placement. Okay. So many people usually know they will measure lateral aspect. So it can't be done in the hand. So if you are measuring the middle finger, okay, if you are measuring the middle finger ROM, okay, and PIP joint ROM, if you're doing a lateral aspect, if you're doing the lateral aspect, so it is very difficult, right? All the other fingers will be hindering. See, if you're doing a lateral aspect, the in between, no, it will be a disturbance for measuring. So always go for dorsal placement of the goniometer and measure the range of motion of joints in fingers. Okay. Then what are the other measurements? I told you about Sims-Weinstein monofilament. I'll show you. So as of now I have two filaments. So this is the thickest filament. Okay, you can see the orange thickest filament comes in colors. This is red. This is also somewhat thick. This third level filament. This is the fourth level filament, very thickest filament. Okay, so I will demonstrate with this filament 4.56, right? So how to test? Light touch is tested with Sims-Weinstein monofilament, right? So the patient's fingertips are tested as it is the area of manipulation, as the sensory fibers are more there. Ask the patient to close the eyes, okay, and just press it until it makes a shape of C. Can you see the shape of C? So till that you should press it and take it. So do it for 3 times continuously. So the patient eyes should be closed when doing this procedure. The instruction given is whether he feels the sensation when he is pressing. Okay. So 3 times should be the repetition. Okay. 1 out of 3 is correct response, and he is able to feel the sensation. Okay. If he is not feeling with this filament, go to the more thicker filament. Okay. So I told 4 filaments are tested. First is green. Green, if he is eliciting the green thinnest filament, he is normal. If we can't elicit the green thinnest filament, go for the next thicker filament. Okay, that is 3.45 something. Okay, and if he can elicit that filament, he has diminished touch sensation. Even if he can't elicit that blue filament, second filament, go for the third filament. Third is what I shown now. Third is this thing, 4.56. Okay, if he elicits this 1 out of 3 while testing, that tells that there is diminished protective sensation. Okay, diminished protective sensation, and then even if you can't feel in this monofilament, go for the thicker one, thickest one. Thickest one is fourth filament, 6.65. And while testing this, don't bend it. It is very thick. Don't bend it. It will break off. So just press it and take off. Unlike other filaments, in this you shouldn't expect a C shape. Just press it firmly and take off. This is the thickest filament. If the patient can't even feel this filament, his hand is anesthetic. He doesn't have light touch sensation at all. Okay, this is the way we document light touch. Next modality is 2-point discrimination. 2-point discrimination is the functional sensation to be tested. So, what is 2-point discrimination? Discriminating or differentiating between 2 points. This is the discriminator, you can see here. So, there are 2 prongs here, right? So, there will be distance between the 2 points, right? So, the distance will be varying, right? All the distance are varying distances. This is small distance, this is a bit larger, this even more larger distance are there. Then you can see the smallest filament here, very small, small distance is there. This 2 mm distance between the prongs. Okay, so how to do this 2PD? There are 2 2PD sides, as I told you, moving 2PD and static 2PD. Okay, moving 2PD should be tested first as it recovers first after nerve repair. Okay, so how to test moving 2PD? Moving 2PD tested in fingertips, as I told you earlier, as this is the area of manipulation. So start with 6 mm. Start with 6 mm. So 6 mm between this two pins, there will be 6 mm distance. Okay, in the fingertips. Okay, always while doing, okay, don't, this moving 2PD, right? Don't do in a transverse direction. It should be parallel to the digital nerve or in the longitudinal direction. Always do like this. That is, the fingertip, perform proximal to distal. Perform proximal to distal, right? The pressure shouldn't be too large that it will damage the skin or barely touch. It should be moderate pressure should be given from proximal to distal in the fingertip, right? Just a drag, right? And it should be in the longitudinal direction. Why it should be in the longitudinal direction? Because the nerves, digital nerves pass in the longitudinal direction. Okay, we can isolate a specific digital nerves. If you are doing a transverse direction, what happens? We can't isolate one digital nerve. 2 digital nerves we are testing. Okay, then our testing is wrong. We have to isolate to a specific digital nerve. So test in the longitudinal direction, either medial aspect of the finger or lateral aspect of the finger, because it is where the nerves pass, either in the medial side or in the lateral side of the digits, where the digital nerves pass. Okay, this is the testing, like this, proximal to distal of the finger tip. Okay, so first start with the 6 mm discrimination distance. Okay, and with the eyes closed, 7 out of correct 10 responses. That is, see, assume that I am a patient. I am asking the patient to close his eyes and ask him to give responses when asking. So the patient is asked whether he feels the 2 points or 1 point, whether he feels 2 points or 1 point. The therapist has to alternate with 1 point and 2 point, 1 point and 2 point. So he has to respond, the patient has to respond whether he is feeling 1 point in his skin or 2 points in his skin, 7 correct responses out of 10 trials. Okay, 7 or more than 7 are correct responses, and he has 2-point discrimination with that particular distance. So if he has 2-point he can elicit with 6 mm, go to the smaller thing, 5 mm you go, then least prongs you can discriminate, then go for the 4 mm. But if the patient is can't able to elicit with 6 mm or the larger diameter, then it's a problem. Then there is diminished sensation of 2-point discrimination. Then go for the larger one. Then go for 7 mm if you can't elicit it. Okay, then go for 7 mm. Or larger distances can be increased if the patient can't elicit 2-point discrimination with the particular distance. Okay. So yes, this is all about hand evaluation. I hope I have covered almost all the evaluation part. So yes, thank you all the participants for patient listening. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, doctor. We now have Dr. Riddhi with us. She will be giving the vote of thanks. So over to you, Dr. Riddhi.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to get this opportunity to present vote of thanks on this occasion. First and foremost, I would like to thank the speaker for today, Dr. Kishore, for sharing his expertise with us and providing a comprehensive guidelines for complete examination of hand along along with different conditions and their specific assessments being taped upon. Thank you so much, Doctor. It was indeed enlightening. I also thank all the attendees for actively participating in this webinar. I thank all the IIPWC Goa team working together to make this webinar successful. I also sincerely thank the IIP Central Committee for providing us this platform, technical team for giving essential support. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank,
madam.
thank you, Dr. Riddhi. I would like to thank the IIPWC team for organizing this webinar on hand evaluation. Valuable time to us. I would like to thank our attendees. Uh, Riddhi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Smarika. Thank you.